We need a warning signal.
We don't need a warning signal, Kevin. I can see him right there.
We do.
I promise you, we don't need a
warning. Warning! 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 Warning!
Phyllis! Phyllis!
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We really hope that you guys watch rules 1 through 4. If you haven't, please go do that right now.
First of all, I want to say so much has changed since the video we did 2 weeks ago when we filmed outside. And then last week's was inside.
Yes.
And now this one is outside again, and it's so hot and it's so sticky. And there's flies everywhere.
I've apologized 1,000 times because it really is hot.
It's so hot.
Bear with us if we're a little irritable and we
and I start pouring sweat.
Yes, and we start sweating.
I get the sweat stash.
Really, really bad. Yeah, I start dripping down the little mustache I have. She said I look like Zorro, so there you go, everybody.
Only if you do this.
If I do that, yeah. You guys think I look like Zorro? That's for you guys, okay? Enjoy that little embarrassing thing there. Anyway, we're gonna jump into rule 5. Again, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. To open this up,
I would never dislike my children, though.
You wouldn't?
No.
Oh yeah. See, that's the lie people tell you.
And no one else would ever dislike my child either.
Okay, you're making jokes now. Okay.
No,
well, you kind of are. You're also the coolest person I know.
Got that on film.
But no, she's really getting to something, and while she's doing that, we're gonna read Ephesians 6 1 through 4. While we're talking about this, you guys can turn to that. That is something that's really gonna be expounded on as we look in rule 5, is the fact that for some reason there's this misconception that there's no way that I can't like my children, or there's no way that no one else will possibly like my children. But it's really possible, and what Ephesians is going to point out to us is that it's all up to you. It's all up to you as the parent to dictate whether or not your child is a child that everyone genuinely likes, or they're that monster, right? So Ephesians, Lauren, why don't you kick us off with verses 1 through 4.
Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with you and you may live long on the earth. And you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord.
So, yes, honoring your mother and father is super important. And all the kids, teenagers, youth group, if you're watching this, absolutely, we want you to listen and honor your mother, respect your mother and father. That's the goal. But the important takeaway that I feel like really provides some foundation for this is the fact that parents, they're the most important part. They're what dictates whether or not children really want to honor their mother and father. And of course, there's always the outliers. There's the children that sometimes they're a little more difficult to handle, and sometimes they don't listen as much no matter how hard you work. But for the most part, a lot of it has to do with how you're parenting your child. Mm-hmm. And of course, you know, we're not parents yet. Let's kind of open up with that. We understand we're not parents yet, and that it's going to be completely different when we're parents. We're not stupid. We get that. But we also wanted to provide you guys with some wisdom, because despite the fact that we're not parents, we do have these conversations because we want to be parents one day.
And also, your job is children.
Yes.
His job is children who have come from the worst backgrounds and worst family situations.
Yes.
And helping them become functioning children and eventually adults.
Yes.
So he ain't all that dumb when it comes to kids.
Well, and to give you guys a little tidbit into that, I am a play therapist, clinician, whatever, and a lot of my work is done with children that, like she said, is in trauma, and a lot of the bases of the work we do is developing the child's sense of emotional identification, being able to tie a particular action with a particular feeling, right? So if they're, because a lot of times children that come from that background, they don't fully understand those things. Being autonomous, being able to function by themselves, being empathetic, connecting with other human beings. And a lot of that is done through play, which is something we're going to talk about, because as parents, as you're working with your kids, being able to observe them in play and being able to develop them in such a way through that tool is something that's very valuable as a parent to develop in your children. So with that being said, we're going to move on to, what does understanding yourself have to do with children? So Lauren, do you want to kick us off with this, or is that going to be?
I think that this is one of your
Is
favorite
this-
questions.
This is more of a
Because I
me
know
thing.
exactly where you're gonna go with it. I think.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't even know why you asked.
She's got me
'cause
pegged.
I know that you wanted to answer this.
I do. Okay, so I do want to answer it, but I feel like
You're being nice. It's fine.
Okay, I am being a little nice, but I also enjoy like hearing what you have to say on these things, and I will get back to you. Don't think you're gonna get away with this. So it has understanding yourself has a lot to do with how you're going to raise your children.
Oh yeah.
If you're unaware of your dark side, if you're unaware of who you are, then it makes it a lot more complicated when it comes to navigating your kids, right? Because then, if you're not aware of yourself, then a lot of those things that could potentially sneak in and can make your child a monster ends up doing that.
I got Rona going on.
She's got the cough. I've got flies sticking all over my face. No, we're sorry about that.
In my throat. Go ahead.
No, get away from me. Anyway, I'm awkward. Sorry about that, guys. Anyway, the whole thing is being aware of who you are, because for example, your kid's playing, right, and they come up to you and they're super excited, and you're angry. But instead of you understanding and acknowledging that anger within yourself and what it is you're going through, and separating yourself from that child, what you end up doing is you end up taking that out on the kid. And that can do a lot of damage in the long run if you're not careful. So the whole point is be aware that, you're not going to always be the best person. And that when we're angry and when we're upset and when we're because it kind of goes back to the field I work in, right? Just imagine if these kids, right, go and this does happen. These kids, they're going through trauma, they're going through everything they're experiencing, whether it be, and not to get depressing, but they're getting raped, they're getting abused by their parents, there's substance abuse in the home, there's a lot of fighting and arguing, domestic violence, things of that nature. That tends to fester and grow if it's not dealt with.
So I think a good way to think about it, that the parent may think whenever they're angry about something that happened at work or with their spouse or whatever, and they may lash out on the kid, that may look small to the adult, but it may have a lasting effect on the child. Because if you think about it on the flip side, we all have like certain memories with our parents, good memories with our parents that seemed very small at the time, but now they're so much bigger. Yeah. Like with my dad, he during the summer, whenever I would play basketball, at the end of every practice, he would stay with me and shoot 100 foul shots after. So it was something that was very small, but it really wasn't. Yeah. And so obviously that's the good side, the good memory side of it. So there's always the other side, the negative memory of it, where that can affect the child in the long run.
And I think kind of going even lower, right? Us as human beings, we tend to get impacted and like our brains get impressed on a lot easier when there's emotion tied to it, right? So when a child or you know, anybody is having to go through anything consistently over a certain period of time, whether it's good or it's bad, that starts to manifest itself. And it's why it's so important to talk about these things and to understand who you are as a person, so that when it comes to raising up your kids, you're not impressing on them those negative things, and instead you are acknowledging, you're
Right.
growing.
Because this talks about honor your father and mother.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you honor someone who's not honorable?
That's true.
You know, it obviously we honor God, but how could you say that he's not honorable?
Exactly.
So you can't be a parent and demand this respect, demand this honor simply because you birthed this child or offered the DNA to make this child. You have to be a respectable and honorable person for your and that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
You know, even if it is, you're my child, I brought you into this world, so you need to, yes, ideally, okay, that makes sense, but it's a kid. Have you ever been around any child who's about 4 or 5 and you say, you know, the sky is blue, and their answer is why? And you say, because God made it that way, and they say, well, why? Because they want to know, they're curious, they want to know, why should I listen to mom and dad? Okay, because I respect you and I know what's going to happen if I don't listen to you.
Yeah. Yep. I guess a lot of that, I guess to kind of close it up, would be, you know, you can see that in like generational trauma, right? I deal with that a lot. Is, you know, your grandmother's she unfortunately gets raped. Then all of a sudden you see the mother get raped, and then you see the daughter get raped, and it's like, why is this happening? And of course it's horrible. It is so hard, and I don't know how sometimes to function at work, because it's not to say that these people aren't victims, that the things that happen to them aren't horrible things. But then you start to talk to them and you have the conversations with them and you start to notice that there are patterns, right? For example, in the grandmother's time, it was very shameful to talk about these things. And so that is then passed on to the mother, and that is then passed on to the child. And so what happens is someone has to break the cycle. Someone has to be aware of what is going on around them so that the next generation can be impacted in a positive way.
We need to break the cycle of sweep it under the rug and move forward, because that's not how life works.
Yes. And
yes, the world does not stop spinning whenever bad things happen. 100%.
Agreed.
But when something as traumatic as that happened, you can't tell. It's so detrimental to tell a young girl or even a young boy, because it happens to them all the time, to say, you know, just move on, just move forward, because that's not the reality of it.
Yeah.
And I know you know that more than anyone. But
Well, I mean, and she's hit the nail right on the head. And kind of moving on, I feel like this is a smooth transition into the importance of understanding how the concept of punishment and the reward system works. Like, there's this misconception of punishment and encouragement, right? So first of all, if my child is crying, that's a big one that you see in foster care, right? If someone's, you hold these babies, they're crying a lot, they're going through a lot.
oh yeah, some babies would show up and that's all they did for 2 days straight, because it's a very sad process that even when they're young babies and you would think that they have no idea what is going on, they have an idea what's going on. They know that they just got ripped from whatever family they were in, whether it was their biological or another foster home, and now they're placed in this strange environment. And that is very impactful even as a baby.
Think about the connection between a father and a baby, or a mother and a baby, right? A lot of that connection from a baby side of things comes from like their smell. It comes from like their touch, like they're familiar even before they can see you. That's how they connect with you. And when you throw them into a different environment, it's still a shock. It's just as much of a shock. And when they're crying, it's like, I just want them to stop crying. But sometimes that's not the best thing for the baby. Because like up to 6 months, of course, like if they cry, like you bend to their will. Like that's about how it works.
Right, because usually at that, and even, I wouldn't even say all the way up to 6 months. I would say like 3 months and lower. If they're crying, something's wrong. Like they are either sleepy, they're hungry, they need a diaper change. Yeah. And that's how they express to
very
you.
Very basic
But
needs,
then they get trained of, I cry, and they come to me, and I cry, and they will give me what I want. Yeah. And so that's how they develop the terrible twos. And that, we're not sitting here saying you can avoid it, because that's so unrealistic. No. It's not even funny. Yeah. But there are steps that you can take to, because once the child gets to that point, you have like 2 roads you could go on, and it's, I will either stand my ground, which is super hard to do whenever you're running on low hours of sleep and you have a baby who is crying.
Absolutely.
But you can either stick to your guns and show them, no, I'm mom or I'm dad and I'm the boss here. It's not the other way around. Or you can bend to their will, do what they want to make them stop crying in the moment and create a monster. Yeah. So that's what's going to happen. Speaking
of which, that, you know what that makes me think of is something that Jordan Peterson, he talks about. It wasn't in the book per se, but it was... Guy? He's the author of the book. Please read the book. Oh yes, this is a promotion. 12 Rules for Life, ladies and gentlemen. Please feel free to read that book.
Unfortunately, we're not
if you
sponsored,
have not.
Though.
We are not sponsored, so please don't sue us and don't take the little money we have. But Jordan Peterson, he came up with this video where he was talking about, I think he was babysitting a kid or something of that nature, and he goes and it's this, I think there was multiple kids, but one of the kids was particularly stubborn. So what he did is the kid would get up and, like, after being put down after 30 minutes, and he would get up and he would try and climb out of his crib. And so what Jordan Peterson would do is he would go in and he would say, okay, it's time to get back to bed. So he would lay him down, and then the kid would hop back up. And so he would have to lay him back down. And he said that he had done this for a while, trying to get the kid to lay down. And of course, that sounds super tedious. It sounds annoying. It sounds like something no parent wants to do, right? But at the end of the day, guess what happened? After 10, 15, 20, maybe even 30 times of having to lay this kid back down in the bed, the kid laid down in the bed. And so next time, when he said, lay down, the kid thinks about, well, I don't want to have to go through this another 30 times. It's like, no, I'll lay down when he tells me to lay down. So it's always rough at the beginning. It's just like punishment. It's just like encouragement. When you see a kid, right, for example, here's the reward thing. If you see a kid doing something that you want him to do, again, a behavior, anything, you're more likely to get that to happen again if you, good job, oh, that was great, oh, you did this, not, oh, you did that, I wish you'd do that more often. It's like, yeah, don't do that, because the kid is more likely not to do that thing because you're immediately bringing him back to something he did wrong. You know?
And even if you say something encouraging and your tone is in a negative way, it can be taken in a negative way.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. And it's just such a tricky thing. And it's like, for example, paying attention to when you punish. Like, please don't be that person that your kid does something great and you punish the kid when he'd like, oh, I'm gonna wait until, oh, he's doing something good. I'm gonna wait until everything is fine and then I'm gonna get him. It's like, no, don't do that, because then he's less likely to do that good thing again. It's like, oh no. But it's kind of understanding how those things work so that you can encourage the behaviors you want. And it's all about, and this is the same thing I tell all of my patients, clients. I tell them consistency is key. It's all about consistency. If you do not follow through you can do one thing 9 out of 10 times. If you don't do it that one time, that kid will pick up on that, and he won't do it the next time.
And we're
most
talking
likely
a lot about babies, but kids are
They're the same way.
They're adaptable, and they're kind of like viruses. Or
wait, first you say it's possible not to like your kid, and then you're calling them a virus?
it's
What's
true.
next?
They adapt. They adapt.
do.
As they grow older to different ways of, and obviously the teenage years, they go into a rebellious stage, and they find different ways to drive you insane.
Yeah.
But it's still that consistency and creating functional human beings in their, because you want, as a parent, you want to raise your child. They may hate you while you're raising them, but the goal is that they grow up, they're a functional human being, and you're friends when they're adults. You want to be friends with your kids. You want to raise a child that you would want to have as a friend, instead of someone where you're like, wow, like this kid is a real jerk. I wouldn't want to be his friend.
Exactly. Oh, well, let's do this before we move on, because this actually does go into our next question. Proverbs chapter 13, verse 24. I'll read that for you guys, okay? So it says, he who spares his rod hates his son, but he who loves him disciplines him promptly.
That is not politically correct.
No, it's not. I shouldn't have said that.
Guess what? The Bible's not politically correct.
Boom. Roasted. I mean, burn.
We'll skip over that soapbox, though, so go ahead.
Yeah, we'll skip over that. Anyway, the important thing about this verse is understanding that the right thing is not always the easy thing. Sometimes, and I'm not just talking, and when this is saying this, it's not like, it's not saying beat your kid with a rod. No, it's understanding that, you know, whether it's, you know, telling them, okay, go to the corner because you did this. Every child is different, and you have to learn that and understand and navigate that. But with every child though, it's, if I tell you to go to the corner and I tell you to go to the corner for 5 minutes, which there's a whole different thing going into taking into consideration what age your child is, right? Because please don't make your 4-year-old stand in the corner for 10 minutes. They don't understand. They've already forgotten what they did at that point.
That's true.
So like how they typically do it in counseling is if they're 4 years old, 4 minutes, and then walking them through why it is, you know, you had to punish them again, right? And saying, hey, you just can't do this again. And providing them that understanding and their feeling and acknowledging what they did. And that there's emotion behind it, that you get all that, but they still can't do that. But the whole thing is no matter how difficult it is, if you tell them to go in the corner for the 4 minutes, please don't take them out early. Don't break, don't crack, don't. If I say you're not allowed to do this weekend, follow through with that. Because you know what else you're expected to do? If you say, I'm going to, because you did this, I'm going to provide you with ice cream at the end of the weekend, guess what you have to follow through with? It's the same thing. If you tell
my favorite is young children out in public and the mom or dad saying, if you do this one more time, I'm gonna spank you.
Don't do that.
I'm gonna do blah blah blah.
Don't do it.
And then the next time comes and you don't do it, that child literally thinks you're a joke, and so does every other person in the room with you.
Yep. And we're not saying, again, I feel like we have to say this a bunch of times.
But
I do, because like it's almost like, oh, you don't understand, you're not empathetic to the fact. No, we're not saying it's not hard. We're not saying that it's not a difficult thing to have to endure. Is I have to tell my child, no, there's a sweet baby angel, they're looking at me with their beautiful eyes, and I mean, they did this good thing the other time, and sometimes they're so sweet and they give me hugs. We get all of that. Trust me when I tell you, I don't have a kid yet, but I have a niece that, I mean, I feel like if she asked me to like burn the world down, I probably would.
In a hot second.
In a hot second. I mean, all she's got to do is look at me with those beautiful eyes, and I'd be done. But it's a no. When you say no, it's no, and when you say yes, it's yes.
Well, and you've
through.
made you made the grown-up decision to bring the child into the world. You might as well make the grown-up decision to stick to your guns.
Raise a
and
good child.
Raise a good child.
Raise a good child. Because guess what? Believe it or not, we can't stress this enough. There is a possibility that child will grow up and you will not like that child. You won't. Okay? Because I experience it all the time. I experience children that parents come and they're like, I really don't want to say this, but I do not like my child. Like, there's just sometimes they're just too much. There's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. And you have to, at that point, when you're 20, 30, 40, and your child is 2, you have to look internally. You have to look at yourself. So, another thing is, and again, like I said, we're going to move on. Question 3. So what does not letting your children do anything that makes you dislike them mean? Okay, we're going to close this up. We're going to wrap this up. What does that mean? So, your job as a parent, especially as a Christian parent, is to raise a child that is Christ-like, that is able to be socially desirable, that is autonomous, meaning independent and capable, so that when they grow up, they can effectively and efficiently navigate the world around us. That's not easy. It is difficult. But in the end, it is so much more rewarding. So much more rewarding to have a child that you can have a conversation with, that you know is competent, and that you know is able. You want a child that, and it's the reason why we do play, because that's the way children communicate. That's the way they understand the world around them. That is the way they, if you see an adult, if a child sees their parents arguing, you're more than likely to walk into the room an hour or 2 later and see them playing with 2 and they're like arguing. That's the same reason why you see them with a Barbie doll and a action figure and they're like me, because they're trying to process what mommy and daddy are doing. They're trying to create a conclusion. They're trying to understand the world around them. So provide them with that understanding through your action and through your consistency. So when we say do not let your child do anything that makes you dislike them, be that role model. Understand your dark side and your faults and your mishaps, and produce something, create a world for your child that allows you to like them and allows them to be functioning human beings.
You don't want to be that dad who had to refuse his child and kick his child out of the house for 2 weeks because he decided to go on spring break during the coronavirus pandemic.
You don't want to be that person.
You want to raise a child that's responsible enough to say, you know what, Dad, you're right. I shouldn't go spring breaking and bring something home.
And that makes you think, is what was the dad and the mom doing?
I know
over
that they
time,
warned him, but
Yeah.
they said, if you go and do this, you can't come home.
Agreed.
But then the kid tried to come back home anyway.
And that's the outliers that I was talking about. The parents may have tried their very best to develop them, but the point is in the end as well, and this is another point, in the end, did you try your hardest? Did you recognize these things? If your child still comes out a monster, it's super sad, it's super unfortunate, it makes you angry, but you got to be able to tell yourself at the end of the day that at least you tried your best, and you provide them with a foundation so that not only all of the things we talked about, but that they have a solid Christian foundation to come back to. It's just like the prodigal son. There is no prodigal son, there is no son returning if there's no foundation to come back to. If you didn't provide that to them as they were growing up, if you did not produce them in such a way that would make you like them.